911 to the feedback location of the emergency. Well, just 67 Colorado Springs. My phone says you know it's about and it's almost 7. And we went to one friend's house, and but he's going to do the friend's house, and they said he wasn't there, and the other one said he never came there. I don't know if there's like a time limit, but like he's only 11.
The voice you just heard was Letecia Stauch. She had just called 911 to report that her stepson, 11-year-old Gannon Stauch, did not return home from his friend's house. Letecia spoke with the friends he stayed with and a few others, but he was nowhere to be found. It was as if he had vanished from the face of the earth. Before we begin, we extend our deepest sympathies and heartfelt condolences to the loved ones of Gannon Stauch, who suffered from the horrific events in the case you are about to hear. It was a chilly winter day with temperatures barely above freezing on Monday, January 27, 2020 in El Paso County, Colorado. Night had fallen a mere 2 hours before the El Paso County Police Department received a call from a home in the Lawson Ranch community located southeast of Colorado Springs. The caller identified herself as Letecia Stauch, claiming she couldn't locate her stepson Gannon. He was supposed to return home from a friend's house an hour ago. At the time, Gannon was living with his father Al, an active member of the National Guard, as well as his stepmother, 36-year-old Letecia, his younger sister Lena, and his stepsister, 17-year-old Harley Hunt, who was attending nursing school. Al was deployed during the time Gannon went missing. 3 months later, Gannon's body was finally found, about 1,400 miles away from his home in Pace, Florida, under a bridge. Gannon was born on September 29, 2008. To Al Stauch and Landon Bullard Hiot, Lena, his little sister, was 3 years younger. His family originally lived in Loris, South Carolina. After his parents divorced, Gannon and Lena moved to Colorado with their father, who remarried to Letecia. Together with Letecia's daughter Harley, they all lived in a lovely home in El Paso County. Al likes to keep his family's lives private, so little is known about the family before the tragic murder occurred. But it is known that Gannon was a huge fan of the character Sonic and that his favourite colour was blue. 4 days after Gannon was reported missing, Letecia agreed to an interview with a KKTV reporter. The interview left the reporter highly puzzled and concerned by Leticia's behaviour.
Any message for Gannon?
Gannon, when you get here, you'll be able to truly tell what happened. And then I really hope I get a sincere apology from everyone who has made all those things, especially from my husband.
Wilson told the courtroom when the camera stopped recording, Stauch wanted to redo her message to her stepson.
I can't wait till you can come home and let everyone know that you're okay. We love you.
Though Letecia told police she had checked with multiple people in her search for Gannon, she never provided any specific names or addresses of the people she contacted. After speaking with neighbours and friends, it became obvious that Gannon had never stayed at a friend's house. In fact, the last person who saw Gannon alive was Letecia. Gannon's father Al, who was miles away from home in Oklahoma for military training, quickly became suspicious of Letecia's story about Gannon's disappearance. He spoke with the FBI and they began to listen to the phone calls Al made to Letecia, hoping to somehow acquire information about Gannon's whereabouts. The investigators spoke with Letecia many times during their investigation. They realized the details of her story about the day Gannon went missing had changed, not once, but multiple times. Letecia's story made a dramatic change from Gannon disappearing while visiting a friend to being kidnapped by a man whom she had hired to repair a carpet. She claimed the man raped her and abducted Gannon right after, an incident she never reported. Along with her ever-changing alibi, Letecia showed other suspicious behaviours, renting a car, disconnecting her cell phone from the network for an extended period of time, and abnormal patterns of travel, including a 1,400-mile trip to Florida. When Letecia made the trip to Florida, she took her daughter Harley with her. The young nursing student could never have imagined the reason behind her mother's sudden desire to travel so far from home while everyone was out searching for her stepbrother. As investigators conducted a thorough search of the Stauch's residence, they found evidence of a violent event in Gannon's bedroom. Blood splatter was found on the walls, and bloodstains had seeped into Gannon's mattress, carpet pad, and the concrete floor underneath the bed. Having realized she was now the primary suspect in Gannon's disappearance, Letecia took off, making it about 1,800 miles away from El Paso County. Though Letecia had made it 7 states away from Colorado, police caught up with her in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on March 2, 2020, nearly a 26-hour drive from her home. Police immediately returned Letecia to El Paso County, where she remained in jail without bond on charges regarding the death and disappearance of Gannon Stauch. Though police had their suspect safely locked away, there was still no trace of Gannon. It was nearing the 3-month mark since Gannon had gone missing. The police continued their search for Gannon's body, but had no success. There was no way police could have known that Gannon was miles away, and their continued search in Colorado was in vain. His body was finally recovered on March 17th, but not by anyone who knew he was missing. Bridge Inspector Macon Ponder, who works for Florida Department of Transportation, was inspecting a bridge near Pace, Florida, when his team happened to come across a suitcase hidden right where they were taking measurements. Out of pure curiosity, Mr. Ponder and his team decided to retrieve the suitcase. It was impossible for them to know the significance of their discovery. Picking up the suitcase, Mr. Ponder noticed it was unusually heavy, but summed it up to water damage. He pulled the suitcase out of the muddy marsh and placed it on a flat sandy surface underneath the bridge. Laying the suitcase on its side, Mr. Ponder began to unzip the suitcase and immediately noticed an awful smell escaping from inside. It's at that moment he realized the suitcase was not filled with soaked clothes or belongings, but something dead. It wasn't unusual for Mr. Ponder's team to find animals, such as a litter of puppies or kittens, tied up in a bag and tossed out to drown or die on the side of the road. But this suitcase contained something bigger.
The best I remember there being little socks on them. And before anything else happened, I couldn't really make out what it was. Matt dumped the suitcase over, and of course we immediately knew it was a body.
One of the men on Mr. Ponder's team, who was a volunteer firefighter, immediately called 911. It didn't take long for the body to be positively identified as Gannon Stauch. During the medical examination, Gannon was found to have 18 stab wounds, a fractured skull, and a bullet wound. Somehow, Letecia managed to make an over 21-hour drive across the country with Gannon's body in the back of her truck without getting caught. Investigators pieced together that Letecia murdered Gannon on January 27, 2020, once she had him alone. Then she hid his body in the trunk of her car and transported him somewhere in Douglas County, Colorado. Later, Letecia went back for Gannon's body and drove to Pace, Florida, where she dumped his remains under a bridge. In the past, Letecia worked as a school teacher, surrounded by numerous children 5 days a week, making the fact that she brutally murdered an innocent child even more shocking. Having chosen a career field where she worked with children, why suddenly would she choose to murder one that was like her own child? Since Letecia refuses to admit guilt in her crimes, only she knows the answer to that question. Letecia had a disturbing childhood filled with physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, something Letecia made public after her arrest for Gannon's murder. A few weeks before Gannon's killing, Letecia was referred to a psychologist by the military health clinic where she had been receiving treatment. The therapist who saw Letecia diagnosed her with a general anxiety disorder, but did not see any signs that she was a threat to herself or others, and said Letecia was completely aware of her surroundings. While in jail, Letecia began putting significant thought into her mental health, saying, "You have plenty of time to sit in here and actually breathe and be able to process it, because I hadn't even gone through the emotions of all of it yet, and the emotions, of being this bad person and all that." As she starts to put all the pieces together, she comes to the conclusion that she's suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and a dissociative identity disorder caused by her childhood. She undergoes mental health examinations while in prison. The psychologists conclude that she suffers from a personality disorder with borderline narcissistic features, but she was not suffering from a multiple personality disorder. While undergoing the mental health exams, Letecia admitted to shooting Gannon, but claimed she thought he was a caped intruder breaking into her home. Letecia always claimed she was innocent, but now says she's not guilty by reason of insanity.
I never would purposely hurt Gannon or hurt anyone that I would have thought it would have been Gannon. Never in a million years, okay? Never.
Letecia also admitted to placing Gannon's lifeless body in a suitcase in the back of her van. However, she argued that it happened while she was under the power of one of her personalities and was unaware of her actions until she was imprisoned.
Tonight, in the Gannon Stauch case, the 11-year-old boy's body believed to have been found in Florida. His stepmom reported him missing back in January, and as News 5's Colette Bordelon explains, she is now facing 9 new charges accused of his murder.
While neighbors work to remember a young boy taken too soon,
justice will be served. If it's not here on earth, it'll be up in heaven.
Only time will tell what happened to Gannon, as his stepmom sits in jail, accused of the crime.
With the coming of spring in 2023, so also did the trial for Letecia over 3 years after Gannon's brutal murder. The defense tried to build a strong case for Letecia, focusing on her mental health issues caused by her childhood trauma. Their primary witness was American psychiatrist Dr. Dorothy Lewis, who inspired the 2020 documentary film Crazy, Not Insane, which followed her research as she studied the psychology of murderers like Ted Bundy. Dr. Lewis spent her entire career trying to understand the mind of a killer and searching for scientific explanations of their behavior. During the trial, Dr. Lewis watched multiple police interviews with Letecia. In these interviews, Dr. Lewis watched as Letecia allegedly slipped in and out of her various personalities, one named Taylor, another named Maria Sanchez, and another Jasmine. Of all these personalities, Maria, with an accent that sounded similar to Russian, appeared to Dr. Lewis to be quite capable of murder. After studying nearly 2 hours of video, Dr. Lewis was convinced that Letecia was suffering from dissociative identity disorder and was clinically insane during the time of the murder. She believed it was the Maria personality that murdered Gannon and not a sane Letecia. The prosecution argued that Letecia hated Gannon and decided to kill him because she wanted to deeply hurt his father, whom she was planning on leaving. The prosecution fought hard to discredit Dr. Lewis's diagnosis. When they questioned Dr. Lewis, her responses summed up to "I'm not sure" or "I don't know." Dr. Lewis said there was no way she could provide an accurate diagnosis without conducting an MRI and an electroencephalogram on Letecia. Still, she stood by her evaluation. Other factors of the case highly affected the defense's sanity plea as well, such as the amount of effort Letecia made to hide Gannon's body, which happened over a period of weeks. Furthermore, it is noteworthy that Dr. Lewis, who interviewed Letecia and asserted her having a dissociative personality disorder resulting in a state of insanity during the murder, was a defense witness who conducted an insufficient evaluation. Conversely, all the professionals who thoroughly examined Letecia concluded that she was mentally stable. Could a person with multiple personality disorder have murdered someone, stashed their body twice over a matter of weeks, and during all this time never at any point realize or question what they had done? The trial dragged on for a grueling 5 weeks before the court called for deliberations. It took a jury of 12 nearly 8 hours to come to a decision. In the end, they unanimously found Letecia guilty of murdering young Gannon, rejecting her claim to be insane when she took Gannon's life. Judge Gregory Werner stated the facts in this case were the most horrific he had ever witnessed. He ensured Letecia received the maximum punishment possible under Colorado law, life without the possibility of parole for first-degree murder, plus 12 years in prison and 3 years parole for tampering with a deceased human body, and 8 months for tampering with physical evidence. With Gannon's killer behind bars for the rest of her life, his family could finally find peace.
Peace. That's all I found was peace. For more than 3 years I've struggled. You try to put puzzle pieces together of what makes sense, and no matter how hard you try to make sense of it, it never made sense to me. But to hear that the verdict today, guilty, made more sense to me.
When you look into your mother's eyes, you know that is the purest love you can find on this earth, wrote American author Mitch Albom. This is the sort of love all children deserve, whether it be from a biological parent, step-parent, or an adopted guardian. Unbeknownst to the Stauch family, they had a hateful adult in their household who, instead of providing her children with the love and care they deserved, was biding her time until she could take out her anger and frustration upon an innocent child.